Hi there, it's Simon Hurley from Inklips, and I hope you guys are having an awesome day. Now today I wanted to share a stamp layering technique with a little bit of a twist with some metallic accents. Now I'm going to do this using some Gilding Flakes and a couple other products to make them stick, which gives a super awesome effect. It's a little bit different than foiling or heat embossing, and in real life it's just stunning. So I only got to creating 2 cards in today's video, however there are so many techniques to use Gilding Flakes and I hope to share more in the future. So today I decided to use the Cozy Cardinal stamp set from Right at Home that was just released. This is an awesome layering stamp set that is adorable, but I also find that it works super well because it has a nice solid bottom images, and then it also has those fun details that are tiny and they can be added using those Gilding Flakes. So for my stamping on today's card, I'm using the MISTI stamping tool, and I'm going to ink up this first large stomach image of the bird and stamp that down onto the cardstock. Now since I'm using the MISTI today, it makes it super easy to line these images up, and especially in areas where the head needs to meet the body perfectly or the wing, you just want to make sure there's no white gaps there, and I find that this makes it a lot easier. Now I can also stamp things twice in case I want them to be darker. For instance, this wing didn't have the perfect tone, so I wanted it to be just a little bit darker than the ink actually was. Now to add my Gilding Flakes, I'm using these 2 tiny detailed images to add some little metallic accents. So I'm taking my anti-static powder tool and making sure that nothing's going to stick to those inks. And then I'll line up those images on my MISTI, and I'm going to ink it up with Versamark ink, which is clear and sticky so the embossing powder will stick to it. And I'll stamp that down once, and I'm going to do it just a second time to make sure that it's really nice and sticky so that everything will stick to it. And after that's done, I can add my embossing powder. Now this is Ranger Sticky Embossing Powder, which is super important when adding the Gilding Flakes because it won't just stick to any kind of embossing powder, it needs to be this sticky type. So I'm being nice and generous, and then if there's any in areas where I don't want it, you want to make sure to get rid of that so there's no random gold flecks. And then I'm going to heat this with my heat embossing tool until it turns clear, and that's when you know it's nice and ready. Now to bring in the Nuvo Gilding Flakes, these can be quite messy if you don't take care when you're using them, so just be careful. But I'm just going to take a couple of these awesome shiny little flakes and add them over top of that embossing powder. Now you only need a little bit here, a little bit goes a long way with these, but I'm just kind of patting them over that sticky embossing powder area, and that'll make it kind of cling to it. And as I start rubbing here, it buffs it into each piece of that embossing powder and make sure it's nice and stuck down there. Now to just add a little bit more security to it and make sure nothing comes off, I'm going in with a kind of a stippling brush here, and I'm going to rub off some of those flakes, and then you can add some of those bigger pieces back into the jar for cleanup and then just vacuum up the rest. I find that that works the best, and it's nice and easy cleanup because otherwise those tend to want to fly everywhere. But after that's done, it won't rub off, and you get that cool textured gold look that's hard to get with embossing powder or foiling, so it gives a really unique effect. Then I've added on my coordinating die over top where I'm going to cut it out, and this just helps line up those little feet images that aren't attached together, and also this tail here. I just wanted to ensure that I would get perfect placement, so I lined it up on my MISTI, and I can stamp it down using that same color of ink I used and just layering it twice. And then I can run this through my die cutting machine, and then you get this awesome little cutout cardinal with that perfect border. Now to add little blush that comes in the set, I stamped it down with Versamark ink, and then I'm going to add some light pink Nuvo embossing powder, and I can heat this up with my heat tool, and it'll give those light pink blush cheeks even over top of that dark background, so that works really well with that stamp layering, especially if you want a lighter image. So I'm going to quickly recap how to add the foil one more time on a different example, and at the end we'll put both of the cards together. So after everything's all stamped, I'm going over it with my embossing buddy just to make sure that there's no static on the page so the embossing powder won't stick anywhere. And then I added the detail images on with that sticky embossing powder, and then I can add my silver foiling here. So I'm just taking a couple little pieces of this foiling and adding it onto here. Now don't be worried about your waste, it's kind of like embossing powder where you can put it right back in the jar. I've stuck that down to the embossing there, and then I can kind of move it around with my finger and make sure it's nice and buffed into the image, and then you can rub those off. And this just makes sure that it's nice and stuck. You can go in with that stippling brush too to make sure it's on there, and after that's done, you can wipe away some of the pieces back into the jar, and some of those little tiny pieces that tend to fly everywhere, I just enjoy vacuuming them up so that they're not everywhere on my surface. So then I've heat embossed those blushes, again with the pink embossing powder to make it stand out nicely from the blue background. And after I've embossed that, I'm going to use the coordinating die to cut this image out. And there you have your two little cardinals, and I think these are really unique and stunning effects you can get with the Gilding Flakes. So on these two card examples here, you can probably tell there's some Gilding Flakes in the background as well, and I did that with a similar technique as those birds. So I'm just going to take my Versamark ink pad onto this falling snow background stamp, and I'll ink that up, and then I can move my cardstock over top of it and stamp that down to transfer that clear sticky ink onto the cardstock. And you want to make sure your ink pad is nice and juicy, and you could do this in your MISTI to make sure you get a solid impression. And that way when you're sprinkling on your Ranger sticky embossing powder, you can make sure it covers everywhere and make sure that it sticks nicely to get some great Gilding Flakes later on. Now also you could use a glue pen to draw your own designs, and maybe I'll do that in a future video to get a really awesome result, but I think it's cool that you can use them with your stamps and incorporate them with products you already have as well. So using this background stamp here, I'm going to heat up that embossing powder until it turns nice and clear, and that's how you know it's sticky and ready to add the Gilding Flakes onto it. So this time, as I'm adding them, I have both jars here, and I'm going to pull a little bit from each one and kind of sporadically move it around the background so you get a little bit of silver and a little bit of the gold on both backgrounds. And this just creates a really awesome kind of speckled effect. And since they both had different color schemes, I decided to combine them both for the backgrounds, and you get a really awesome kind of blended gilded flake look. Now you're not able to really put these back in the jar since they're mixed up, so you could put them in a separate bag to use this mix later on separate cards, because you don't really want to waste all those Gilding Flakes. So I'm just going to kind of move these around with my fingers here. You can also go in with that same brush that I did earlier to make sure that it's in all of those different pieces of embossing powder there. And you can see that I'm kind of picking it up and moving it around. You just want to make sure that every piece is nice and covered, and it might take a little bit of pressing it into the embossing powder or rubbing it quite a bit to make sure it's nice and buffed into there, and that it won't come off later on your fingers. So now we're in the final stretch here, and I'm going to be sharing quickly how I finished off both of these cards pretty simply. So I'm taking some Tailored Expressions felt here that's super nice and soft, and it gives kind of a different texture that's unexpected on the card. And I'm going to add some Be Creative tape to the back of it, which is a super strong adhesive, and we won't have to add any liquid adhesive or anything afterwards then. So I'm going to cut this little piece off here, and then I can run this through my die cutting machine to make sure that that adhesive is going to stick nicely onto the back of this felt. And then to create the little piece here, I'm going to take my coordinating die that actually goes along with the stamp layering set with a nice little tree and some leaves. However, I'm just using the die to cut out this piece of felt here, and I think it creates an awesome little textured embellishment to the card, and it's something that's a little bit unexpected, but I love the texture of this felt on the card. So I'm going to pull that out of the die cut there, and it cut pretty smoothly. And here, I admit, was probably where I should have stopped. I decided I wanted to add some birch tree shading here with some Copic marker, and I didn't love how it turned out. I just kind of enjoyed the flat look of felt instead. However, if you do like that shading, you could maybe use the stamp from the set too to stamp it right over top of this on that felt. So then I'm peeling off that Be Creative tape on the back there, just peeling off that release paper to reveal this super sticky felt, and this creates an awesome adhesive that I can just stick it right down onto my card. And this is going to be that great little landing where that bird can sit on, and it'll make it look like that bird just has a little nest right on the side of the card there. So I added that tree down, and then on top I added the bird using some foam tape. And I think that works out really nicely, and I like how it's not two stamped images, how it has that awesome texture beneath it. So for the sentiment here that I'm going to add onto the cards, I took this new stamp set from Right at Home that has a bunch of awesome holiday greetings, and I'm going to stamp this onto some separate white cardstock with black ink. It's pretty simple, but after I'm done stamping these down, I can cut them out with a nice little border around them, and I like doing this rather than just leaving it a rectangle, because I find it adds some interest to your card. And instead of having those harsh edges, you have this nice soft edge with that sentiment on it. So then after I'm done with that, I'm going to add this to the top and bottom of my cards using some foam tape, and that finishes them both off. I actually changed out the card base for craft after this because I love it for the holiday season, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, please give it a big thumbs up. I'll have more videos on screen here if you enjoy my content. If you want to subscribe, I would love for you to join my family and never miss another video. And also if you click on my blog post there will be much more info, a full supplies list, and many more pictures as well. So I hope to see you guys very soon. Bye!